So thank you. That was a really great introduction to the project. So I experienced some of the preview at Sundance in January, which is what got me really excited about. I'm so glad you're here to talk about it. And that experience certainly of knowing that there are live actors, which I kind of didn't realize. I knew that we were all, so I guess one thing we should talk about is the Oculus Quest, which enables some of this, because we started as individuals going into a space, and we knew we were going to be playing this game as a group, and we all went into different rooms. And then there's that point at which you kind of realize, oh, there are live actors in this theatrical space. So can you talk a bit about the technology and how that's also enabled this project?
I don't want to sound like advertisement for the Quest.
No, but just
but it is. Yeah. I mean, it is a game changer in the sense that it's wireless. You know, it's untethered, and the way the controllers get tracked through the headset is allowing us to have the actors, embody a character, which is a game changer because, again, like we would have to be doing this with motion capture suits and all that, and we realized we didn't have to do that at all.
So that's probably also a bit of a budget saver to not have to.
Definitely.
Yeah.
We're also like an indie team and have 80 hours in mocap, so there's by doing this we were able to create our own system that could mocap actors without going to a studio. How many people are familiar with VR or headsets?
Exactly. Is it good? Okay. Oh, great.
Okay, cool. How many familiar with the Quest? Awesome.
Okay.
I think it will become more and more available. I do feel like the Quest, I was surprised, I do feel like it's a step in a direction of having a more natural consumer-facing product for VR. So it's very interesting in that way. But what is relevant about it, too, is not just the way that we're using the untethered space to, tie the hands and the point of the head for tracking actors, but is you basically paint your area that you have free to roam so you can walk and you're in the headset and there's a guardian, if you're getting close, but because you have that freedom of movement, it also allows for some fluidity in performance. Granted, there are technical constraints in terms of movement for the actors, but it does make it a lot easier to perform.
Yesterday, you were sort of talking a bit about the influences, a game like, Journey or obviously Sleep No More, which you brought up earlier in your presentation. Can you talk about that and then also what it was important for you to then also make unique and do that's new and different in this project compared to these sort of predecessors that are at that intersection of gaming and then also immersive theater?
Do you guys, have you played or heard of the game Journey? Yeah, it's beautiful, right? It's awesome. There's a point in it where it's more of kind of an exploratory pilgrimage where your avatar is this character and you're going through the sands and deserts and different environments that are changing, and there's a mountain in the distance and you're always kind of going to that mountain. And it sounds really boring, but it's very spiritual and moving. And when it first came out, my partner and I were playing it, and there's this beautiful moment where there's other characters that look like you around, and this is where a lot of the inspiration comes from. But we realized through the quality of how we felt like they were communicating with the limited vocabulary of the avatars and how these other beings were moving in the space, they were like, wait, we think that these are actually other live players, not AI or not computer, generated characters. And through that, there's very simple communication mechanisms. You can kind of chirp, or there's a scarf that you can kind of build out, and the way that with just those simple communication styles, you can lead other people through exploring these different environments is actually really powerful. Is this live or pre-recorded, where there's this uncanny magic, in that moment as you're deciding it, that I think was a lot of the inspiration behind this project. And even in our decision, we decided that we weren't going to be, there's people who do wonderful VR chat, Altspace is great VR chat to go on with your friends and talk. Or there's people who, are doing live venues for theaters for tons of people. And we realized that we wanted to make this game more about an intimacy, vaudeville theater, intimate, close performances. and also just gesture, and what types of like play would emerge between people through just like the by limiting different sorts of gesture you could do.
And I guess that ties immediately with the inspiration from Sleep No More of these one-on-one moments where if you've gone through it, you're sort of in a group, you're anonymous, you're wearing a mask, but one of the actors can sort of, I don't even know if that's like the fourth wall, like can sort of break it and come and grab you and take you into a different room and start, a conversation or just a moment with you. We learned a lot of stuff from like the previews at Sundance of how it is very different to do crowd control with real people, but then being in an avatar and having these players who all look the same and have no expression. How do you sort of not control them, but kind of like manage, the live part of it? But there was, I think, inspiration, but a lot of work around the skills that they have as a theater troupe, the work that Samantha and Danny had been done, and even like each actor brought, something new to the table.
And you brought this background in puppeteering.
Yes.
Can you talk about that?
I'm a puppeteer, yes. I've been a
yeah.
puppeteer for a very long time.
Was one of the MCs in that you?
Yeah,
I think it
think
might have
so.
been. Sometimes we will slip into the characters too.
Yeah,
and-
it's what you realize is that it becomes very physical, right? And that's one of the advantages of like this medium VR, that communication sometimes is like, through like your physical body and like the things you can do. And it's really interesting to go back to the on-theater experience. The fact that you can move around and, like it makes it so more like, I want to say bigger. It's like a bigger experience.
You have more freedom because
have
being aware that you're tethered causes you to restrict your movement. And
because something like that I realized I started doing with the on-tether experience is like actually walk. Because sometimes when you have the cable, you move a little, but you kind of like, remember the cable. Without it, like you start walking around, and it is a more immersive, bigger experience, I would say.
So, I mean, I think it's would be really interesting to hear how, you're obviously both in the creative side and academic side. Do you think you approach the creative production differently because of, your academic background?
I used to be a professor at the Rhode Island School of Design and Digital Performance. So I'm thinking about if I want to make that my dissertation and that public as we go through that process, and like I reference not only like the creative practice of that training, but the things that we're drawing from.
We've definitely learned a lot of stuff on the go. It's been interesting. You should really write that.
That's great. Yeah, it sounds like it's a really great, like there's research.
Yeah, we're basically creating like this new breed of actors where like we did casting in LA a couple of months back for the people who are going to be on the live run. And it's like a mixture of like immersive actors, but who have like puppeteering skills, who have like really big improv, chops, who can do crowd control. So it's a lot.
It's asking a lot.
And
it's
who
a
can
lot.
act
It's
in the
asking a
headset.
lot.
Yeah.
The actor system, we give them these controllers, and each hand has sort of like a menu where they can cue lights or cue music or like spawn prizes. So they're doing all this like improvisation, and at the same time they have to remember how to use the controllers. And when we were doing the casting, I was like, and if you're a gamer, it's a plus. But the training is gonna be intense.
Yeah. I think even at Sundance, the Sundance set of actors were Pi-hole, who we've been working with for 2 years. This current set of actors are all people local to LA who are professional, mostly immersive theater actors. Directing the actors we do in VR.
Yeah.
So it's like everyone just hangs out, like watching each other on stage in different like cat avatars and stuff, and like talking and giving notes, which is definitely a weird paradigm. But when we were casting the actors for Sundance, they're all really strong, but like Alexandra, who like
Not a gamer.
not like we just put her in there, and it took like it was a learning curve, but once she like got the interface of it being second nature, like she was able, just her skill in terms of I guess she was better at like crowd control. She was able to like kind of really rise up. So there's like a very, mix, and you have to meet people where they are.
And it might be worth talking a little bit about this crowd control situation.
Yeah, that's actually what I was going to ask about.
Yeah, because there is a very different audience what a live show would be to like gamers. The reality, and something we discover at like those previews, was that people come in and they want to test the world, right? Like they want to throw around the chairs and they want to throw things around, and and if like you're on stage giving a show, it's kind of difficult again with no communication.
That it's easily distracting because there's so much in the space. I remember you want to like take pictures off the wall.
Yes.
Like, can I knock this? And also, it's such a new technology. Everyone wants to explore. What can I do? How can I interact and engage with the space? Yeah. So.
And what was very for me, it was really interesting. Again, Tara, who's the director of Pie Hall, she talked about crowd control from like a drag queen show standpoint. Where they have all these skills because they get harassed on stage like all the time, and how they
Unruly
like
people.
Yeah, exactly. Instead of like, I don't know, like getting angry or whatever, they kind of try to pull that person into the show and like make them part of what they're doing. And that was one of like the skills that the actors started learning.
It's also, I have to say, because of that aspect as well, and because you're in the experience with other people, there's an emotional aspect as well, because you're playing games and competing at times, and you start to realize you're also competing for the attention of the actor.
Yes.
So, on the stage, it's like, oh, you're in competition. And so that's a really interesting dynamic, and it becomes emotional. There's sort of games and contests and questions, and if if you lose or if you're not selected to go and do something, then you start to feel like, oh, what am I doing something wrong? Like, how do I get back in the game? So can you talk about the dynamics of that, of like setting up those kinds of emotional cues? Because obviously that's intentional.
Yeah, I think like I'm not sure at what point you saw it, but as we had Sundance was a really good testing ground for us for that. So in that particular Jazzercise Fitness one, there's a moment where they're like, oh, who's Phil, the office pariah? And they choose one person in that group to be Phil. And suddenly everybody, they're like, point at Phil. And it's this exercise where like everybody is pointing. And it's like so like jarring. It's the idea of like being seen, in a way suddenly like all that focus and attention shifts to you. And like people have different emotional responses to that, right? Some people are like, yeah. And some people are like really horrified. So we had to kind of work with that and make it so, okay, well, whoever is chosen as Phil also gets the reward of being the first person brought on stage, which is kind of, there's like a special, it becomes the idea of like being selected to be brought on stage, we realized became like a special gift, like people wanted that. So then like, Phil is brought on stage and everyone like gives him gifts or, does this thing, and he becomes kind of briefly the spotlight from the actor shifts to the player. We had 2 actors each hour in that particular case, and we also had one-on-one encounters that those actors who were there were slipping in and out of other characters and teleporting different places. So like if you encountered them just before this performance or just after, one might be a fisherman in like this area. And the dynamic of a one-on-one encounter is sort of strange and, an immersive there in real life as it is, but there's like a sort of amplified element to it that that when we do the actor training, it will be like, how do you kind of push, intimacy in this virtual space where like you don't have the luxury of reading a player's facial expression. So what can you get from the body in terms of like, how you respond to a player.
How long is this story, or could this story be as an experience?
I mean, we have something like between 8 and 10 hours of content. The ship itself is in a loop, in an hour loop. But when we say an hour loop, you could follow one of 10 characters through their hour, right? So there's moments that you can go into what we're calling their labyrinths and save them. So that adds another 30 minutes. It is one of those things that you could play it once and maybe spend an hour there, But then if you want to go see the acts in the under, you know, the acts are also like an hour if you were to sit down, and so all of them,
Go
so
through
that's
all of
two. And then if you go into multiplayer space, there's a lot to do, you know, that it's not necessarily content, but stuff that you can do with each other. So yeah, so I think we're like nailing like 8 to 10 hours, at least of content.
Wow.
Yeah.
So now, I mean, you're heading into, in a month or, you know, a few weeks' time,
Soon,
it's
yeah.
very soon, a launch. How, you know, as I think the challenge everyone talks about is, you know, enabling the people to know about the launch and the marketing and promotion of this new piece. And so it was one of the reasons I was really glad you can come and talk about it.
No, thank you.
So,
Thank you.
so what are, you know, how, are there any things you were planning to do differently as you launch this piece to, and to get, you know, the marketing out just across theater, you know, people who love immersive theater and gaming and VR in general?
It is going to be interesting because also it comes to like who has the headsets, right?
Yeah.
Because this experience, it's going to come out first on the Quest and then hopefully on the Rift. We're planning to, you know, target like 3 different communities of people. We've grown close with the immersive theater community here in LA, which is strong. But we are still like kind of figuring out what best.
This is maybe veering a little bit into industry questions, but we can also, you know, answer those things. Like we work with a PR person, so we're, you know, we had to figure, like, tailor our message to those different communities, which also, you know, they have different strategies and different people that you reach out to. We're also doing some live, you know, later when we'll announce some, you know, like
some live,
yeah,
some live things, 'cause,
pop-ups,
yeah.
like kind of like the Sundance experience where people can go and, okay, that's great.
because not everybody has a Quest.
Yeah.
But the thing about our projects, and which is true in VR in general, is it's so much of the promotion is related to the ecosystem of VR and where projects are positioned within that ecosystem. And that is like for people who have that headset. But our projects usually have like a long tail, and they usually like are in different forms or come to different platforms, you know, eventually.
And also one thing that we wanted to work with is the fact that it's non-location based. So anybody anywhere in the world can join in a headset. So I think we will be doing like live events, but it's also kind of like we want to prove that it is like non-location based. Depending on how many people are at a certain time in the game, in the network, we have a system that would divide people into like groups of
Different
15.
groups. Got it.
So that everybody can have a good experience. And we have a system for the actors to kind of be tracking
Where people are.
Yeah.
Oh, geez.
where are more people, who hasn't seen a live actor, who hasn't seen a certain stage.
Oh, so then do the actors play across different groups as well, that same pool? Oh, that's really interesting then.
Yeah.
Potentially confusing. Okay, oh, that's really interesting. Our time for the panel has come to close, but thank you. I wish we could announce a specific date. What is the best way for people to kind of follow you and find out about the launch date and updates as you post information about casting, all of that?
I think our social media, we're not great at it, but we're trying to be. But that's where we always announce like new stuff. At Tenderclaws. We also post a lot of pictures of our cat, our office cat. So you know, if you're into cats, you'll have a great time.
Fantastic, great. Well, thank you very much.
No, thank you.
I cannot
Thank you
wait
so much.
until
Yeah.
you know, it's live. I can go back in there.
Yes, yes.